Uneducated people voted to leave the EU, suggests Joe Johnson. Philip Hammond says, we might have to compromise on migration, says Hammond, because access to the single market is as important as controlling movement. The main reason the British public voted Brexit, despite a massive media and propaganda campaign, was because of immigration. Immigration in general. Most of my neighbours are from other countries. Very few people that I know were born in London. The Britain as a whole is becoming a USA, a pound shop USA, right? Britain is not a country of immigration. Well, at least it shouldn't be. These elitists, now this guy here is Joe Johnson, a man I've never really heard of. Apparently he's the universities minister. He backed the Remain campaign, and his brother is Boris Johnson, the Turkophile, who at the last minute decided to back the Leave campaign as a Trojan horse, basically. Uneducated people voted to leave the EU, which is a smear. Actually, people who showed principle and judgment voted to leave the EU, right? Because, and it says more people from disadvantaged backgrounds go to university. So what Johnson is saying is, put people into the elite so that they will then vote for elitist policies. Too many people felt left behind. But it's not just about education. We can't have what these idiots don't understand is that the public, that there's always going to be a need for people doing manual work. People who, in many ways, postmen and bin men and road sweepers and people doing mechanics and so on are more valuable to our country than these toffs who we're all supposed to admire, right? It's very patronising and demeaning to suggest that the arguments to leave the EU were based upon lack of education. As a matter of fact, it's exactly the opposite. And another thing is, people with good jobs who voted to stay in the EU don't seem to understand that their vote affects other people. Just because you personally benefit. If I stole other people's money, that would benefit me, but it would not benefit the people I steal from. Therefore, I would not do it. I would not vote for something that's bad for the general public. And that's the difference between me and the elite. The elitists want rich people and toffs and people who went to university to vote for the EU because they think it's good for them. But they don't seem to realise that these immigrants go and live in other parts of the country where English the rich people invite people to the UK knowing that these people will not live with them. It's simply not good enough. Mr. Johnson, who backed the Remain campaign. And another thing I'd like to know is, why are all these Remainers still in office? I mean, surely we should have people who are prepared to implement the government policies, the will of the people. The will of the people. It's not fair that these people continue to ignore public opinion, and that most of the jobs in both the Tories and Labour Party are held by people who are Remainers. How can people who are committed to Remain, even the public, be expected to implement policies of Leave? It's simply not right. Theresa May should sack all the people who voted Remain, but I mean, she herself voted Remain. I mean, that's the problem. Leave voters by age, 27% of younger people. But you see, the point is, these people don't know, assuming this is correct, and we don't know if it's correct, these people don't seem to have no experience of Britain as an independent nation. These people who are 80 to 24 grew up in the EU. So people who have no experience of Britain as an independent nation vote for more of the same shit, right? And the people who've got experience of both Britain as an independent nation, as Britain as part of the superstate EU, voted for Leave. And that goes to show that older people are wiser than young people, and that's a fact. I'm not going to be told what to do by some moron who's just out of school, some kids, 27%. And again, I don't know if these figures are true. Frequently these figures are lies, right? The poll is reasonably large, but like I said, polls are quite often manipulated based upon the the result that the people who pay for it want. I don't know if Lord Ashcroft wants Britain to leave the EU, but it's quite likely. But polls are often, the result is usually conducive to the person who's paying for it, right? Therefore, Remainers are not going to commission a poll that will show that 99% of people want to leave. It just won't happen. There was a correlation between levels of education generally likelihood of Brexit. Well, look, if poor people who are losing out because of millions of foreigners flooding in vote leave, that stands to reason. I don't want to have my neighbours changing every few weeks, right? Where I live, in the house I live, all the other people in the house are foreigners. Not only is all the other people foreigners, but all the mail for previous tenants is to foreign names as well. And I'm not alone. This has been duplicated throughout Britain. British people are being marginalised and kicked out of their own country, right? And that's a fact. Now, Philip Hammond says that the ongoing, free market, so-called free market, it's not free at all, is more important than migration, and it isn't. The number one problem by far that British people want to deal with is immigration. By far, it's the number one problem. It's the number one issue. And I don't agree for 1 second that the issue is about simply low wages. People with good jobs and people with high qualifications should be living in their own countries, contributing to the development of their own countries. People with good jobs will also be affected if other people with skills keep flooding in. They're going to affect the economy in general. Yes, buy-to-let landlords, right? These are the people who will benefit. Divide and rule. Right now we get the ridiculous situation that Muslims, blacks and East Europeans all support the EU, despite the fact that, generally speaking, these groups all hate each other. British people are being squeezed out. We're going to be like the Red Indians, and that's a fact. We need to deal with these issues. The problem is not highly skilled and highly paid bankers, brain surgeons, software engineers. Who says it's not the problem? The British people spoke, and immigration was the number one issue. It's not for Philip Hammond to say, oh, the single market. It doesn't want access to the single market. If the EU refuses to, this is one of the easiest things to do without the EU. Switzerland and Norway are not in the single market. They could still trade freely. The shops are full of stuff manufactured in other countries. If I go to the shops, I can buy products from the United States, Canada, Turkey, North Africa, all around the world. These countries are not in the single market. It's perfectly possible and easy to trade with countries despite being. So you don't have to be in the EU to trade with the EU. That's a big rubbish. And the idea that we should carry on accepting unlimited number of immigrants from all over the world simply so we can have so-called access to the single market is bullshit. And it makes me sick that the guy who's the Chancellor, probably the second most important job in the country, is given to a man like Hammond, who's a disgusting little Zionist anyway, to actually speak out and ignore the main issue. For 99% of people who voted Brexit, the issue was not the single fucking market, which we don't give a shit about, okay? Because we can trade with anyone we like. The issue was immigration. The issue was immigration. The issue was the fact that millions of people from all over Europe, which is expanding by the minute, okay? The issue is immigration. Why won't little pipsqueak, nincompoop, Philip Hammond understand that? And why was he chosen to be the Chancellor with his pro-EU views? It's time we had a clear out. It's time we had politicians who reflected the best interests of the public. In particular, we need politicians who champion the needs of the poorest people in this country, the people who are overlooked, not just by the Conservative Party, but the Labour Party. I accuse Hammond of treason, but I also would say that Hammond's policies are basically the policies of George Soros and Jeremy Corbyn.